Excuse me. Hi there. How you doing? Good. Good. Well, if not, then hopefully we can help with that. That's what we're gonna try to do. Um, welcome. This is Harry Potter Abridged, and you probably already knew that. But anyway, we are making our way in the most efficient way possible through Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And today we are on Chapter 5. And Chapter 5 in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is the Dementor. Yeah. Finally, we get to use the fucking word. Finally. But, well, I want to say putting this whole word use issue aside, which, hopefully we will after this chapter. I'm not going to make any promises for this episode, though. But attempting to put that aside for the moment. The Dementor, or the Dementors as characters, I guess you could say, or as entities in this story, they sort of are like the embodiment of like depression. Like I mean, the most common description by characters in the books is, well, there's two. If it's third person, you're talking about what they do. People will say they suck all the happiness out of you, which, I mean, yeah, that kind of nails how a lot of forms of mental illness and depression can affect you. And then also, the people who've experienced it say that they felt as though they'd never be cheerful again. Also, a fairly accurate description of how a particularly strong depressive episode can make one feel. Sorry. So, that being said, it's worth keeping an eye on that idea. They also serve another function, though, in this story, which is an interesting thing because in a way they provide Harry with information. Don't get me wrong, like the experience that he has to go through to get the information is not good at all. And this chapter only touches on the beginnings of that. Like it kind of happens progressively over the course of the book. But anyway, and it's really, well, yeah, no, we're not going to go too. We'll wait till the chapter where like it becomes more clear. Was there something? Enough prefacing. If we'll tangent when the need comes. So, we're still at the Leaky Cauldron right now, and let's see. And by the way, I watched. I forgot that I used to do this in the earlier episodes. I mean, I guess I knew, but I just hadn't thought about it recently. Like lately, I've just been like recording the episode, which involves like usually a listen and or a read through ahead of time. But I've been going to get my screenshots for the episodes after I record, which means that whatever little bits of the movie I look at it after. And so today I tried to, well, not tried, I succeeded. Woo! I watched a little, the segment of the movie that corresponds with this part of the book. And of course it's fairly condensed and, the dialogue's not nearly as good, and even though it's like probably one of the better Harry Potter movies, there's still like a lot of things to be like about. Although it looks brilliant, of course. That's one of the things I do love about the movies is that they give you the visuals so that you can sort of apply them when you're reading or listening to the books. So it's like, because I mean it's well cast, overall, and people look right, and the settings are amazing, and well. Except for Michael Gambon as Dumbledore. I can't watching how he looks at the beginning of the Great Hall scene in this movie, he looks the part well enough that if he acted it right, it wouldn't matter. But the way, I mean, in this one and in this particular scene, it wasn't that big of a deal. But it's like he has the wrong kind of voice, he has the wrong kind of inflection, he has the wrong kind of energy all the way around. Anyway, let's not go there. But I also, when I was watching the bit for, so the reason why I'm even going down this road this early is the first thing in the book. I mean, in this chapter is Tom, the barkeep or the owner or the whatever word, the landlord, wakes Harry up first thing in the morning with his toothless grin and his cup of tea, and what I was gonna say is that even though it's actually a little bit before this in the movie, the way they portray Tom is like being a fucking like Hunchback of Notre Dame, whatever the fuck, depending on where you live, type of character. Like he seems like dim-witted and like he literally has like the hunchback, like the hump and everything, and it's just like I don't know, like why? Like in the book, he comes across as being just old, but like competent and like totally like does what he needs to do, and he's a fairly non-important character in the books, but it's just I don't know. It just seemed kind of weird. Like, I mean, the person who runs this very important, like gateway into like a very important part of the wizarding world. That didn't make a whole lot of sense for him to be like like almost like almost mentally challenged. I don't know. I mean, not that there's nothing against anybody who's got a mental illness or a mental disability or anything like that. That's not the point. Just the point is like they didn't make him. They made him like a comic character, and I guess I mean obviously when in a movie like this they're always going for well not always but they're often going for laughs. It just didn't seem like the place for it to me. I felt like they cheapened Tom's character. They could have made him a like cooler, like interesting character. Instead, he was like, yeah. Anyway, whatever. Also, strangely, in the situation, the scene where Fudge talks to Harry, because I went back and looked at that too. It's almost like he has like an office at the Leaky Cauldron. It's he's like he sits behind a desk and. I don't know. It also seemed like they, I don't know, like poorly improvised some of the dialogue in that scene, but it was just, I don't know. It's like they were like Stephen Clove, whatever the fuck his name is. If he did write that, it's like he just felt like he had to make the dialogue different than it is in the book, but it's not nearly as effective as if it had been like more copied from the book scene, but. Anyway, I could go on and on about that, and maybe that's why I quit watching the movie ahead of time. But whatever. I mean, and don't get me wrong. Like I said, there are things about this movie that are great. At least as I remember. Anyway, we'll see if I feel that way by the time we're done with this book. Anyway, all right. Back to the book. It's not even. This is actually not the shortest of chapters either. So let's get into this damn thing. So Harry gets ready and gets Hedwig in her cage, and sorry about that, Hedwig, my bad. And blah blah blah. Ron comes in, and Ron and Percy are still like, because Percy now thinks that Ron got tea on the picture of his girlfriend, who is now like hiding her face in the picture because that's Anyway, blah, 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 blah. And so Harry's about to tell Ron about what he overheard the previous night when he heard Mr. and Mrs. Weasley talking. But before he can get into that, Fred and George show up, and so that whole conversation is delayed for the train. They then head down to breakfast. Mr. Weasley's there. He's reading the Daily Prophet again. Yeah, and Ron tries to ask Harry what he was saying, and Harry's like, "Yep, later," because I mean the whole family's around, and he's not going to bring it up in front of them because nobody knows that he overheard that conversation. And Percy comes in, and blah blah blah, and so then we have some back and forth between Ron and Hermione about Crookshanks and Scabbers, because that's like a an ongoing thing in this book is Crookshanks is consistently going after Scabbers, and I mean we find out later that this is not just because of cats and rats, even though that would also be a legitimate reason. But you know, cats can be trained not just like dogs. I mean, a lot of animals that are like domesticatable, whatever, are able to be trained not to harm animals that maybe in the wild they would. And as it turns out, Crookshanks is fucking brilliant for her species. Wait, no, is Crookshanks a boy? That name is so strange that I don't even know. I think Crookshanks is a boy. Whatever. Blah 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 blah. So yeah, they have that little exchange. And the ministry cars that Mr. Weasley got are pulling up, and so they hop. And Mr. Weasley's like right on Harry, like when they come outside, like guiding him straight into the car, like in you get. So they set off for the train station. Nothing particularly interesting happens on the way. That's actually mentioned that it's uneventful. Well, and it's also comparing it to the night bus, which of course is like, banging every like couple of minutes. And like throwing people back and shit. And it says that they're like old-fashioned cars, and they seem practically ordinary, except for the fact that they're able to do, like the night bus, they're able to like get in between things that they ought not to be able to for the size of the car, kind of stuff. And like when it drops them off, like somehow it like manages to get to the front of the line for the traffic light, that kind of shit, magic shit. So Mr. Weasley again is like right on Harry into the station, like kind of staying right at his elbow. And Mr. Weasley takes Harry through the barrier first into platform 9 3/4 too. And that's interesting too, because like since in book 2, obviously there was like a whole fiasco with the barrier being closed by Dobby. We found out later. Even though obviously Mr. Weasley is very concerned about Harry's security anyway because of Sirius Black, it's also like sort of a nod to the situation from the previous book. Like they're not gonna let that shit happen again. Excuse me. So then they are on the platform, and Percy and Ginny come through. Percy goes off to find his girlfriend. Not find her, he sees her and goes off to meet her, I mean to say. And everybody else makes their way through, and then they go up and down the train looking for an empty compartment, which is almost always, or an empty carriage, I should say. And we get a little bit of so another thing that's like a big, well, obviously like the Weasleys in general become like Harry's surrogate family. They're a big family anyway. There's as you might say, a lot of love to go around, but they're just all decent people. Of varying personalities, but still, Percy being a temporary exception for a bit, but all the same. And so they accept Harry in just like he's one of them, because that's how they see him, and that's how he feels too, and he feels grateful, I think, to have that. So anyway, and Mrs. Weasley definitely thinks of him as like a another son. And so anyway, and so there becomes like that like surrogate mother-son relationship thing that sort of happens with the two of them, where Mrs. Weasley like sticks up for him in certain situations, and shows him affection, maybe sometimes even a little bit more than Ron in like very certain situations, just because she feels bad for Harry that he didn't grow up with parents, and not only did he not grow up with parents, he grew up with the fucking Dursleys, and so yeah. So anyway, Mrs. Weasley like gives Harry like an extra hug, and like makes sure that he's gonna take care of himself and all that good stuff, and just it's like the kind of thing that like Harry's sort of needed all of his life. And so even though it's like a little bit embarrassing to him, it's also quite pleasing, because it's like it feels as close to having a real mother as he can get at this point in his life. And then Mr. Weasley pulls Harry aside, which in the movie they did this where, like, instead of it being at the train station, it's like at the Leaky Cauldron. It's one thing that is kind of cool about that part of the movie is there's like this really long, like one long shot that takes in like all the stuff that's going on with the Weasleys coming down and getting to the table, and Mrs. Weasley talking to Harry, and then Mr. Weasley pulling Harry aside, and the twins come around the table. And I mean, it's like there's a lot, and I don't think there's a cut for a while there. Like it's a few minutes. Like it's really kind of neat. And even the way they blocked the scene with Harry and Mr. Weasley, like they start in one place, and then like because there's people around, they have to like sort of move again, and then as they're moving, like the poster of Sirius Black like takes up different parts of the frame, like where it's sort of in the background, then it's like right next to them, and then it's behind them, and then it's out of the frame, but because they move like 4 times, and it's all one shot. It's pretty impressive, actually. Because I mean, when you're doing something like that, the actors have to like stay in it the whole time, so they really have to be on top of shit. But and again, not that it's like the most amazing dialogue compared to like the conversation but it's similar. It's similar enough. Anyway, so Mr. Weasley does pull Harry away towards a pillar and like sort of separates him physically from the rest of the group so that they can like talk without being interrupted. So that's actually quite similar physically to what happens in the movie. And so he's about to like, he's like, there's something I've got to tell you. And Harry's like, well, see, what had happened is I overheard you talking last night with Mrs. Weasley. So, yeah. And Mr. Weasley's like, what? Ah, shit. And he's like, well, that's not really how I wanted you to find out, but, and he's like, you must be really scared. And Harry's like, no, actually, not really. I mean, like, I'm not trying to be all like, big and bad or anything, but, I mean, he can't be worse than Voldemort, right? And of course, Mr. Weasley flinches at the name. And Mr. Weasley is impressed, though. He's like, I knew you were, he says, made of stronger stuff than Fudge thinks. And he's like, I'm glad that you're not scared, but just promise me you won't go looking for Sirius Black. Which, of course, that's one of those like things that you insert into the story here, but it's like we as the reader have absolutely no reason to understand why. And that's on purpose, obviously, but why Harry would want to go look. And he says that. Harry's like, why would I go looking for somebody that wants to kill me? And he's like, swear to me that whatever you might hear, and that's the clue, is that like there's some information that hasn't been imparted just yet. So like you think but you've only heard part of the story. So he's like, whatever you might hear. But of course, before Harry can actually be like, yes, I promise, blah, 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 like the whistle's blowing and like the train's starting to move. And so Harry has to like dash off and run and jump on the train. So, so then, let's see. He, of course, he finds Ron and Hermione, and he's like, we need to talk. And Ron's rude to Ginny and tells her to go away, which is shitty, but Ron is pretty tactless a lot of times. He doesn't really get it either. He's a tactless and oblivious. He doesn't really become self-aware for a while. Not really. Um and so Jenny goes off to go be with her, what is she, a second year now? Is she only 1 year behind them? Oh, I always forget. Like, I know, and then I forget when I'm like need to remember. But whatever. She goes off to be with her friends or whatever. And so the trio look for a compartment, but they're all full except for one, of course, that happens to have an adult in it. And that's not something that usually happens. Like, there's always, aside from the driver or the conductor or whatever, and the lady with the food trolley, the witch with the food trolley, like, those are the only adults and they don't even really see the driver. So really, it's just the lady with the food trolley. And so this is our introduction to Lupin, Remus John Lupin. I think that's right. It's not James, is it? No, because that's Harry James. I mean, yeah. No, I believe it's John. Anyway, and we find out who he is because Hermione sees that Professor R.J. Lupin is on his case, which is in the luggage rack over him. The weird thing is that it says that the name Professor R.J. Lupin is stamped across one corner in peeling letters. Like, why would it be? I know that they're going for the whole, or she, I mean to say, is going for the whole air of shabbiness. But, like, did he teach somewhere else? Like if he just got the job, wouldn't those letters be, like, new? Even if the case was old and shabby? I know, it's a stupid little detail. I might be, like, misinterpreting how it's even written or something, but it's just, like, one of those, I don't know. This is what happens when you read a book or listen to it, like, 8 million times. Eventually, like, everything is something you can pick apart a little bit. That's why we're here. And, of course, Hermione is the one who answers all the questions here because she's good at logic and deductive reasoning. And because Ron's all like, I wonder what he teaches. And she's like, well, there's only one vacancy, so I'm going to say that 2 + 2 = 4, and he's going to teach defense against the dark arts. And, of course, it's noted that they've already had 2 in 2 years before this, so... And there's, like, rumors that the job is jinxed, which, if I'm not mistaken, we do find out, not necessarily, I don't remember if it's in the book or not, or if it's just, like, supplementary information, but I think that Voldemort did, in fact, jinx the job when he was denied it. I don't know exactly how the fuck you do that, but I feel like there was something that he did. How you can set something up to, like, find a way to... keep somebody from keeping, because I mean the circumstances are absolutely different every single year. It's something completely different. So how you could, like, cause that series of events to happen or whatever. And there's another thing about this. I mean, I know that, again, that the whole point of setting up his appearance this way, and the fact that he's sleeping, by the way, in the carriage too, is to give us some insight into what a person who is a werewolf lives like. And I know, spoiler alert, but whatever. Most of you already know this. That's the whole point here. So, because, I mean, he almost looks like, not quite homeless, but he just looks really shabby. And, of course, but my point about that, what I was going to say is, like, he's still a really accomplished wizard. Like, shouldn't you be able to mend things like your robes and shit without having to patch them and have them be frayed and stuff? I don't know. I guess, for some reason, fabric is, it actually, now that I think about it, I mean, whether it's threadbare carpets or old squashy armchairs, like, everything in this story that's old looks old when it comes to, like, stuff that's upholstered or has fabric involved. And really everything, it seems like. It's like that's one thing they don't seem to do, even though, like, if a jar falls off a table and shatters, they'll just be like, reparo, and mend it, and that's that, and you'd never know anything about it. But it's like, if somebody rips their robes, nobody's like, reparo, and then, I don't know. We're this is really not necessary, is it? All right, fine. So anyway, once they realize that he's asleep and everything, or are sure that he's asleep, Harry goes ahead and explains about what he heard the Mr. and Mrs. Weasley discuss the previous night about Sirius Black being out looking for him and this, that, and the other. And, of course, they both kind of freak out. Of course, Hermione's like, oh, Harry, you'll have to be really, really careful, because, and she's like, don't go looking for trouble. Which, I mean, like, and Harry's response, I feel like, is very apropos. He's like, I don't go looking for trouble. Trouble usually finds me. And that's generally true. Don't get me wrong. Harry does, they all three are like, big time snoopers and investigators and detectives and whatnot, but they don't generally actively seek out problems. I mean, there's things that Harry does that get him into trouble, and sometimes he even knows, but even then he's usually reluctant. So yeah. Anyway, and Ron, says the obvious thing. He's like, how thick would Harry have to be to go looking for somebody who wants to kill him? But of course, again, that's just the setup for the fact that, like, there's gonna be a reason. We just don't know it yet. So, and so Harry's like, damn, they're both, like, kind of freaking out, and I'm not really that scared. And Ron does make the point of, nobody knows how Sirius got out of Azkaban, and because nobody's ever done it before. And he was a top security prisoner, which, whatever that means, but Ron would know, because of Mr. Weasley. And then Ron hears Harry's sneakoscope going off in Harry's trunk, and that's kind of an odd thing, because, like, they've already been in the carriage for a little while. Usually when the sneakoscope is going off, it's meant to tell us that Scabbers is nearby. But Scabbers has been there with Ron the whole time. So I don't really get why it just started happening, unless there's something else I'm not thinking of that's going on here. Anyway, so they have a little conversation about what sneakoscopes are. Well, actually, we already know what it is, but Hermione's like, oh, that's interesting, because she's never seen one. And Ron's like, well, maybe it's, it's cheap. Maybe it's going haywire. He's like, it started doing this before I was getting ready to send it. And he's like, well, I wasn't supposed to be using Errol, so maybe that's why. But so we don't know. So anyway, they put it back in Harry's trunk. But it is sort of like a reminder that it does do stuff, because every time it goes off a few times during the book is my point, and that there's a reason. It's not faulty is the point. It's just that they think it is because they can't think of why most of the time that it would be going off. And then Hogsmeade gets brought up again, because Ron's like, oh, we could get it looked at in Hogsmeade, because there's this one place that sells stuff like that. And then Hermione's asking about Hogsmeade, and we get the mention that it is the only non-Muggle settlement in Britain. And Ron's like, yeah, but they got this sweet shop. And then Ron proceeds to, like, actually give us exposition, like food descriptions on sweets. Like, 'cause he talks about what, like, the individual thing is and what it does when you eat it. Because, of course, they're not just sweets, they're like magic sweets. So they do, like, the pepper imps make you smoke at the mouth, and well, one thing doesn't, but then, like, the sugar quills, which are, like, not so much a powerful, but they look like actual quills, so you can just be, like, sucking on the end of one of them, looking like you're thinking about something. And don't get me wrong, like the way Ron acts about all this, I kind of imagine that, like, if I were his age, I would be very similar in this particular situation. I'd be like, I just want to go to the sweet shop, please, and wherever they have coffee. Those would be the things I would want to do. I don't know if I would want the coffee back then, but that's just how I feel about it now. Anyway, but not Madam Puttyfoots, okay? No. And so, yeah, Hermione's still going on about, like, the actual village itself and not the sweet shop. Something about one of the inns, probably the Three Broomsticks, being like the headquarters for a goblin rebellion. And then she mentions the Shrieking Shack, which is going to come up later too. That's supposed to be the most severely haunted building in Britain, which is funny because it's not haunted at all, but won't find out anything about that for a while either. And Ron's still going on about sweets. Let's see. So anyway, this gives us, it's like this little scene provides us two things. It gives us some actual information about Hogsmeade, mostly via Hermione, unless you're interested in sweets. And it also reminds us that Harry never got permission to go. Because, like, Hermione's like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to get out and go explore? And Harry's like, maybe. You'll have to let me know when you get back. And they're like, huh? And he's like, yeah, I didn't get the form signed, and Fudge wouldn't sign it. And Ron's all like thinking, that because it's Harry, he'll get McGonagall or somebody. And Harry's like, McGonagall? She's like the most strict of everybody. And, Oh, and also Ron mentions Fred and George know all the passageways out of the castle, so maybe they could ask them. And Hermione's like, I don't think Harry should be sneaking out of school with Sirius Black on the loose, which, admittedly, with the amount of knowledge that we have up to this point, she's right. And Harry's like, yeah, I'm sure that's what McGonagall will say, but of course he's going to have to ask her anyway, because you got to. And Ron's like, well, if we're with him, Black wouldn't dare. And Hermione's, again, right. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like he's killed all these people. Like, why would a couple of teenagers matter to him? And then more Crookshanks stuff. She lets him out, and Crookshanks leaps onto Ron, and Ron has to hold on to Scabbers, and blah, 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 blah. They kind of bicker a bit, and then as they're about to, like, go on, like, Lupin, like, moves a little bit in his sleep, and they're like, oh. So that kills that argument, and they're riding, and they're traveling, and they're doing the thing, and food trolley comes by. They try to wake up Lupin. He doesn't wake up. Also, another thing that happens, so it's like, because Lupin is in there, it gives them sort of like a little bit of additional protection, if you will, although it's more, in this case, not so much protection, but just keeps a situation from getting worse, because fucking, of course, Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle show up. The trio meets the trio, except that in this case, Malfoy's trio is basically like him and his goons. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. And of course, because we're early on in a book still, we get reminded that Harry and Malfoy have been enemies since they first met. Blah, 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 blah. A description of how Malfoy looks. You know how he looks. We're not going to bother with that. Crabbe and Goyle, physical description. You get it. Malfoy's always got the lamest shit. He's either lame or it's just like incredibly rude. He's like, look who it is, Potty and the Weasel. He's really convinced that he's funny too. And because Crabbe and Goyle chuckle trollishly, then he's, enabled, and he continues to think that he's funny. And he makes fun of Ron for being poor by making mention of the fact that they won that gold over the summer and blah, blah, blah. And then Malfoy hears Professor Lupin give a snort in his sleep, and he's like, oh, who's that? And Harry's like, yeah, new teacher, bitch. Get out our fucking, whatever. Damn it. Get out of our fucking carriage. That's what I was gonna say. Oh, well. Anyway, so yeah, they leave. And Ron's like, I'm not taking any more shit from him this year. If he starts talking about my family again, I'm gonna beat his ass, basically. Because, Ron really just, his temper is not really that long. He doesn't deal well with pressure at all, or anything. I mean, I know that's not really pressure, but like, he's just kind of short-fused for a long time in this story. I mean, there are certain things that he deals with, I guess, but anyway. And so it starts to rain outside because that, suits where we're going with things, and it's getting, darker and darker, and the lanterns come on, and you kind of get the idea that it's like probably prematurely dark because there's so many clouds. Like, it's not, the sun hasn't set yet. It's just a lot. And so now the rain is hammering and the wind is roaring, but Lupin is sleeping on. I assume he is actually asleep this whole time. I think he is. Anyway, because there is like not that I've ever seen it anywhere, but I'm like, there is like the thought maybe that he could be feigning sleep at part of the time just to sort of see what's going on. And of course, he's gonna know who Harry is immediately because Harry looks just like his father, and his father was one of Lupin's best friends. So. But I think he's sleeping. Anyway, and then the train starts to slow down, and Ron's like, "Oh, sweet. I'm starving." I'm like, "Ron, you're always starving." But Hermione, again with the logic, is like, "But it can't be. It's not time yet." And Ron's like, "So why are we stopping?" And the train continues to slow, and Harry gets up and pokes his head out, and there's people everywhere else poking their heads out. So the train comes to a complete stop with a jolt, and then, for no apparent reason, all of the lamps go out, so everybody's in the dark, literally and figuratively. Wait a minute. And then we kind of have like a little mini comedy sketch plays out where everybody's in the dark, and so it's just voices, and like Ron steps on Hermione's foot, and she's like, "Ouch!" And then they wonder aloud if they've broken down, and then if the train's broken down, and Ron, looking outside, says that he thinks he sees something moving out there, and maybe some people are coming aboard. In the movie, in this part of this scene in the movie, they again, like they do have a tendency to make Ron just like a little bit goofier and sillier than he is in the books, which I think is unfortunate because he's already got enough goofiness about him in the first place, so it kind of like always makes you like take him less seriously. They also like really build up the whole thing about like Dementors being really cold and like spreading coldness, because in the movie, like everything they start seeing their breath in front of them, and the window ices up while Ron has his hand pressed against it, and like a bottle of water that's next to the window starts to ice up too, and it's just like and the door to the out into the hallway from the carriage like starts to look like it's misting up and frosting up and like freezing up too, and it's just anyway. So yeah, and so yeah, when Ron's like, he is still the one who says that line about like, I think people are coming aboard, but he's saying it like he's terrified, and it's like there shouldn't really be a reason to be terrified yet because you don't have any fucking idea what's coming. Like yeah, it's a weird situation, but again, that's what's funny about and in the book here, which is what we're fucking doing, is the book, not the movie. Well, first of all, other people come too. It's not just the three of them and Lupin. Neville comes in, like while Harry's standing there, like Neville runs into him, and they're like, and there's like continually people like bumping into each other and stepping on each other's feet because it's in the dark. And so then Neville goes to sit down, and there's like a hiss because he almost sits on Crookshanks, and so like it's just kind of a constant little, it's like a little sketch to like sort of set up like the whole change of mood that's coming, which I think would have been kind of hilarious if they'd pulled it off in the movie, like to have Neville come and then to have Ginny come, because Hermione's like, I'm gonna go talk to the driver, which is, because Hermione likes to, get in charge right quick. And of course, on her way, before she can get out, Ginny runs into her, and they're like, "Who's that? Who's that?" And they're like, "What are you doing?" "I was looking for Ron. Come and sit down." Blah 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 blah. Ouch. Ooh. And then quiet. And it turns out that Lupin has finally woken up to all of this racket. Also, probably like subconsciously noticing that the train wasn't moving anymore. So anyway, and then Lupin, I had never really caught this before this time. I don't really know how or why, or either I did and have just forgotten that I did, which is entirely possible after this many times through. Lupin doesn't just, like, I don't know why, he doesn't just pull a Lumos and light his wand. He, like, casts, like, something similar to what Hermione does with those, like, flames, because it says that there's a soft crackling noise and then a shivering light filled the compartment, and it says that Lupin appears to be holding a handful of flames. And so now that he can see and everybody can see, it's just an interesting thing to do. When everybody's wand actually has the capability of creating light, which is another thing that's kind of funny now that I think about it, because everybody just like got done sitting and stepping on each other in the dark when they could have all, or any like one or two of them could have lit their wands, and that would have been enough to see what was going on. But it was a panicky situation, and that's going to be the reason. Like they weren't they weren't thinking about that in the moment, and they're kids, so. They're not trained to do the smart thing in the moment. But what Lupin does isn't not smart. It's just a little peculiar is all. Anyway, so he starts heading towards the door. And before he can get to it, it slides open on its own. And in the doorway, there is a large cloaked figure that towers to the ceiling, and we get our first description of this Azkaban guard. And its face is completely hidden beneath its cloak. And Harry looks down and sees this hand that is like grayish and glistening and slimy and scabbed, and it looks like something that dead, decayed in the water, which is, that's pretty gross. In the movie, the hand is huge, and maybe it's supposed to be. I don't really know, but in here, that the hand's only visible for a second because it's like it almost sensed Harry's gaze and it like pulls its hand away. Here, I mean, not here, but in the movie, like it like reaches around the door and helps pull it open, and it's like this huge. The look of the hand matches the description pretty well, though, actually. And then we get the first description of what it sounds like when a Dementor takes that long, slow, rattling breath, as though it were trying to suck something more than air from its surroundings. And in the movie, it like they visualize this because it's hard to like imply it otherwise. But they like Harry starts to look a little weird, and like they do this thing where they like create like a blur effect that like looks like literally like a transparent blurry version of part of Harry's like being pulled away from his face and his upper body, like in the direction of the Dementor, which is like a way of showing that it's like sucking something away from him, which, you know, it again, it's like sort of a way to visualize the effect that it's actually happening. But the description in the book, which is where we're at, is that it's an intense cold that sweeps over all of them. And mind you, that they don't feel this cold until the Dementor shows up. Again, in the movie, they needed to sort of like make it more obvious, and it as a result, it gets cold way ahead of time. But anyway, and so Harry feels this cold like deep inside, and like it's in his chest and it's in his heart, and he like his eyes roll up back in his head, and he can't see, and he's the cold is just like consuming him, and then there's like a rushing sound in his ears, and he's like just like getting more and more intense, and then. And this is the beginning of this whole weird thing that happens. He hears a faraway screaming, a terrible, terrified scream. And in his mind, he's like, oh, he wants to help, but he can't do anything. He can't move. He's like stuck in a fog. And then, of course, like finally there's like people calling his name and slapping him in the face and waking him up. And he's like, whoa, what? What happened? And as he comes to, it's clear that some time has passed. Maybe not a lot, but at least a few minutes, because the lights are back on and the train's clearly moving. He can feel the vibration of the engine and the car running on the tracks and all that. And and Harry feels sick, and he's just like, and everybody's like looking at him, and he's got cold sweat on his face, and he's a mess, and everybody's like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, kinda. And so, and he's like, what, who was screaming? And they're like, nobody screamed. And he's like, oh, right, I knew that. And everybody's like looking, everybody looks like shit. I mean, like everybody looks kind of how he feels, but like nobody else passed out. And he asked them that, and they're like, no. Anyway, and Lupin is of course still awake, and he's breaking up a big thing of chocolate and handing it out to everybody. Incidentally, in the movie, he just breaks a piece off and gives it to Harry and nobody else. But anyway, but the effect of the Dementor is more amplified, and that's the funny part about it. Like they build up more to it in the movie, but in the book here, like even though Harry has the most extreme reaction, everybody's shaken. Everybody is well, at least all of the children, because none of them have experienced anything like this before. And so we finally get, after hearing Azkaban guard, Azkaban guard, Azkaban guards, Harry's like, what was that thing? And Lupin's like, a Dementor, one of the Dementors of Azkaban. And so from here on out, you'll notice that nobody uses the phrase Azkaban guards anymore. And maybe we're done with that. Maybe. And so Lupin again is like, eat, it'll help. And I love that that something as lovely as chocolate is the thing that that is like the remedy for like the feeling that the Dementors leave you feeling. I couldn't really pick a better thing. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna go talk to the driver. And so then after he goes out, Harry's like, so what? I don't understand. What the fuck happened? And so I think Hermione starts off, and she explains that the Dementor stood there and looked around, But she's also like, well, I think it did. I couldn't actually see its face. And then they're like, and Ron's like, I thought you were having a fit. And Ron looks scared too, but of course he's also scared for Harry as much as he is for how he felt when the Dementor was there. But and they're telling him that he became rigid and fell out of his seat. And then they said that Lupin stepped over him and pulled out his wand, and then they describe early on a Patronus without getting into what it is. He said a silvery thing shot out of his wand and it turned around and glided away. So, and Neville's like, it was horrible. And of course, you got to wonder, like, I don't know. I don't know if we ever find out. I mean, obviously, I know we don't find out in the books. I don't know if there's any external information about this or not. But like, I don't know if Neville was around when his parents were tortured into insanity. But you got to wonder what Neville hears or thinks of when he's around a Dementor. Like, it's got to be pretty horrible. And his reaction here sort of indicates that it's not a very good thing. Because they're all talking, and it's like they're not even talking to Neville, and he's just like, it was horrible. And it says that his voice is higher than usual, and they talk about how cold it was, and Ron is the one who says that I felt like I'd never be cheerful again, and Ginny is like shaking, and she gives a small sob, and everybody's pretty fucking shook at this point. But Harry's like, so none of you fell off your seat, huh? And they're like, no, but it was horrible, and Ginny was shaking, and Harry's like, huh. So he's feeling, physically pretty horrible, but he's also feeling kind of shameful because he's like, what? Why me? Like, why did this affect me more than anybody else? He doesn't really understand what's going on yet. And Lupin comes back, and he's like, I didn't poison that chocolate. And so they finally start eating the chocolate, and Harry's like, oh, damn, this actually does make me feel better. He starts feeling all warmer and shit. And so they're not far from the school. And so Lupin's trying to figure out how Harry is, and he's like, I'm fine, I'm good, Well, not I'm good, but he's like, I'm okay. So then everything's kind of quiet for the rest of the journey. They don't have that far to go anyway. And so they get there, and they get out of the train, and they see Hagrid calling the first years this way. And so then they go off to the carriages to get taken to the school. Wait a minute, did I miss that before? I'll be damned. Maybe she did. I've wondered, like, we talk a lot on this about but what things were thought of at what point in the books, like things that show up in later books and stuff like that. But we find out later on in Order of the Phoenix that excuse me, that the coaches, the stage coaches that carry the students from the train to the school and back at the beginning and the end of the year are pulled by these what do you want to? I mean, they're sort of like reptile Pegasuses. They're like or dragon horses or whatever the hell they're called. Thestrals is what they are. But anyway, so they're like black, and they have like bat-like wings and like sort of reptilian type heads. Anyway, but it says here that there's at least 100 stagecoaches awaited. Each pulled, Harry could only assume, by an invisible horse. Well, bing, 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 bing. There you are. It is an invisible horse. It just happens to also have wings. I don't think I noticed that. But like I said earlier, I do kind of, it seems to me that by the time she was writing this book, that even the things that might not have been thought of during the writing of the first two, she had definitely fleshed more out here because there's more hint being dropped for things that are coming in future books. Because, I mean, that's still 2 books away. And there aren't, I mean, I'm sure there are some things, but there aren't too many like details of that kind that get dropped 2 books early. You know, most of them happen at the beginning of a book and then get paid off later in the book. But anyway, I'm sure that people will have examples of things that I'm missing that are set up like in 3 books out or 4, but whatever. And so Harry feels better from the chocolate, but he's still feeling weak. And finally, they get up to the gates, and of course, the gates are flanked by 2 Dementors as well. And so Harry just like sits back and closes his eyes, like I'm not here, because he feels like the cold closing in on him again. So they finally get past all that, and when they get out, of course, fucking Malfoy is not far from them, and he's like, "You fainted, Potter. You actually fainted." Is Longbottom telling the truth? Because, of course, Neville had to fucking talk to somebody about it, and he was overheard by Malfoy, so now the story will spread. And even Draco fucking calls it a Dementor now. Like we've just dropped. I told you, Azkaban guard is gone. Because he's like, did the scary old Dementor frighten you too, Weasley? So, you know, it's like everybody knew all along, but they just okay, I'm letting it, I'm trying. Okay, I'm fucking trying. And Lupin comes up and he's like, is there a problem? And Malfoy, of course, like, is so goddamn high and mighty that he actually is all insolent and shitty and like looking at Lupin like scathingly, like, oh no, Professor. Anyway, so then they go up into the castle and and when they get into the entrance hall, before they can make it into the Great Hall, McGonagall calls Harry and Hermione away. And they're both like, huh? But she's like, it's not, you're not in trouble. Like it just, I just need to talk to you for a minute. And so she sends Ron along, which, poor Ron. It seems like there's enough situations where he's sort of left like third wheeling, but then like he's also like sometimes the odd man out. Not third wheeling, but odd man out's what I really mean to say. Because he's like, it comes up like I just started book 6, and like in that book there's the whole thing with Slughorn and his group of students, the Slug Club, and at first Harry's invited, and Ginny's invited, and then eventually Hermione's invited, but Ron's never invited. And it's like, oh, Ron. Anyway, we're staying in book 3. And I think that's probably, although I will say that me doing that chapter earlier today is probably why I feel more bad for Ron right here. Let's see. And so they go to McGonagall's office, and we find out that the reason she wanted Harry is because Lupin had actually sent an owl ahead, I guess probably when he went up to the front of the train. Maybe they keep spare owls, just for emergencies or whatever. So he sent an owl ahead saying that Harry had, as she said, taken ill on the train. And Harry's like, but before he can even say anything, Madame Pomfrey comes in. And Harry's like, oh, for fuck's sake, man. It was already embarrassing enough that, like, I was the only one who collapsed. And now I'm getting, like, all this extra attention. He's like, I'm good. It's cool. And Madame Pomfrey's like, oh, it's you. Motherfucker, always getting into some shit. But then McGonagall's like, it was a Dementor. And she's like, oh. Right. And then she starts bitching about the Dementors, which, that's legit. Nobody really wants those fucking things around. So she's all checking him and feeling his forehead and all that good shit. And she's like, yeah, he's all clammy and talking about how terrible Dementors are and the effect they have on people. And she says, on people who are already delicate. And Harry's like, I'm not delicate. Jesus. And Madame Pomfrey, she's like, of course you're not. Damn. And so McGonagall's like, well, what does he need? Does he need to go to the hospital wing? And he's like, I'm fucking fine. Like, just the idea of Malfoy, like, hearing that he had to spend the first night back at school after he fainted in the hospital wing was about as much as he could take. And Madame Pomfrey then is like, well, at least he should have some chocolate. And Harry's like, Lupin gave me some. I'm good. And she's like, oh, well, we've got a defense against the dark arts teacher that knows what the fuck he's doing. Excellent. And so McGonagall's like, are you sure you're okay? And he's like, yeah, for the 8 millionth time, fucking yes. So she's like, all right, fine, wait outside. I want to talk to Hermione, and then we'll all go down to the feast. So a few minutes later, that actually happens. And we don't really get any idea. Well, we just see that Hermione is looking very happy about something, but we don't really have any idea what that might possibly mean. Although McGonagall did say that the conversation had something to do with Hermione's timeline, or timetable, or also known as schedule. So they get to the Great Hall, and Flitwick is pulling the chair and the hat, the sorting hat, down from the stage. So this is also kind of an interesting way to just tell us that McGonagall doesn't always have to be the one doing the sorting, even though she normally does, because they just missed the sorting. And we get a mention of the houses again, just as a refresher. Sure. McGonagall goes off to the staff table. And so Harry and Hermione go join Ron, and Ron's like, what the hell was that all about? And Harry starts to get into what happened, but before he can, Dumbledore stands up. And so, get a little physical description of Dumbledore. And we talk, and Harry, it's mentioned that Harry, feels like you can't help but trust Albus Dumbledore. It's just the way he comes off. It's everything about him. And it's mentioned that at this moment, Harry feels calm for the first time since the Dementor attack. Truly, well, not attack, but since it showed up. So Dumbledore starts to give his little speech. And so the first thing that he wants to tell everybody, of course, is that there will be Dementors from Azkaban stationed around all the entrances to the school. And he explains that Dementors are not fooled by tricks or disguises or even invisibility cloaks, just as a nod to Harry. I like how he does that. At certain points in his speeches, he talks directly to Fred and George several times. Then in other speeches, he talks directly to Harry or the trio in general, without ever necessarily. Well, sometimes he does look over at Fred and George, but he doesn't look at Harry or Ron right now. And he's like, I look to the prefects and our new head boy and girl to make sure there are no students running foul of the Dementors. And of course, Percy is in his element, puffing up his chest and staring around impressively. And so then Dumbledore introduces the new teachers. So we get the introduction of Lupin, who of course gets scattered applause because not many people know who he is. But of course, the four of them that were... Wait, Harry, Ron. No, the five of them that were in the compartment with Lupin, of course, give much more enthusiastic applause because they're like, this dude's cool. He saved us from the Dementor. So, and Ron notices Snape, and they look over, and he's just looking like he's staring daggers at Lupin. And of course, they think that it's because he got the dark arts job, and that might be part of it, but we learn later that there's more reason than that. And Harry says that or not says, but Harry notices that the look that Snape has on his face is beyond anger. It was loathing. And again, that's because there's history to that. It's not like it's some random dude that Snape's never seen before getting the job. Anyway, and then we find out officially that Hagrid has taken over for the retired Professor Kettleburn at Care of Magical Creatures teacher. And there's a lot of applause, especially at the Gryffindor table. And Hagrid's like all, red in the face, and just like really. And in the movie, in this little part, like he's kind of having a similar reaction, but like McGonagall sitting next to him, and she like tugs at him and makes him stand up when they announce his name, and then like after he stood there for a while, look kind of like froze again, like she tugs at him again, and he sits back down. And of course, just to emphasize his size and for a little extra physical comedy, when he stands up abruptly, of course he like knocks the table forward, and like some things spill, I think, and stuff like that. But whatever. Anyway. And so Hagrid's wiping his eyes because, Hagrid's tough, but he's also sentimental, which is kind of like Hagrid like represents kind of a cool version of masculinity in an interesting sort of way, I guess. I never really thought about that until just now, so if I fuck up, bear with me. But because he's sensitive. I mean, he's totally sensitive, but he's also like he's loyal. I wouldn't even say to a fault. He's just super loyal. And fierce in his loyalty, and because of course he's stronger than he realizes, and really big, that loyalty can really come in handy if you need it. But anyway, I mean, and he can be a bit violent, but like not. He never actually attempts to kill anyone. Actually, like I don't think ever. Even when he like punches somebody, it's like it's because he's been stunned. Or, like somebody was doing something shitty, like he only becomes violent typically if he's actually it's in the defense of somebody else or himself in like a more dangerous situation. And of course, the other thing that makes him like a nice picture of not just masculinity, but also humanity is that, of course, he's the one who loves all the creatures, no matter big, small, dangerous, or otherwise. Which is, a bit like Newt Scamander. But anyway, so let's see. Of course, they have their feast. And so when it finishes, they're able to go up and see Hagrid and congratulate him. But wait, where was it? It says, this is like before that, and this is still, I don't know. I consistently have a problem with this Hagrid situation. Because it says, that he's not a fully qualified wizard, and that we're reminded that he was expelled in his third year for something he didn't do. And it says it had been Harry, Ron, and Hermione who had cleared Hagrid's name last year. Well, first of all, there's never any mention of Hagrid's name being cleared, like ever, except for this. And if that were actually the case, I say again, the man should get a wand. Like without having to hide it in a goddamn umbrella. Like that, it just unjust. Unfucking just. Of course, Hagrid doesn't really seem to care that much. He actually likes the job that he's got, and he doesn't have he's doing what he loves. So, in that regard, it's great, but it's just not fair. Anyway. So anyway, they congratulate him, and he's like, it's all down to you three, which, again, like, if he would, I mean, it's not like he's been reinstated as a fully qualified wizard, so it's not really down to them three. It's down to the retirement bit. But anyway, and of course he also gives credit to Dumbledore, great man, Dumbledore, which he is. And it's like sort of a reminder too that Dumbledore is the one that takes in the necessarily, well, yeah, kind of the downtrodden or the outcasts, I guess maybe is a better way of putting it. And that's a theme that's particularly important in this book with Lupin also. Lupin is somebody who we don't really, well, we kind of learn about it in this book, but we find out more later that like Lupin is one of those people that like sort of, that Dumbledore played sort of a pseudo father / grandfatherly role in their lives. And Hagrid's one of those people too. Anyway. And Hagrid just like overcome with emotion again because he's like, it's what I always wanted. So he's like really, really happy. So McGonagall like shoos him away because he's like burying his face in his napkin again. And so they head up to their common room for the first time, and Percy comes up to give them the password, which is Fortuna Major, which is a musical term, if I'm not mistaken. And Neville's worried about forgetting the password because he's Neville. And of course, you know, it's Harry for the first, well, not for the first, but Harry finally feels like he is at home, and so he's back. And so now the story can begin in earnest as we have reached Hogwarts yet again. And that's another thing that's sort of like a hallmark of the shift in the books, like. The first two books, I think, only have like 1 to 2 chapters total pre-Hogwarts. And they're usually just like him leaving the Dursleys or whatever. I mean, he does go to the Burrow in the second book, but I don't think that's for very long either. Whereas here this was chapter 5, I believe. And, right? Yeah, this was chapter 5, and he's just now back at Hogwarts. And, of course, in the next book, there'll be more time before, and you know, etc. Anyway, so it's that time in the program for us to pop over to the YouTube channel and look at comments. I actually got a lot of comments on yesterday's episode. I can't believe I'm able to say yesterday, but it was. Let's see. Hairless Oyster. He left many comments. Let's see which ones need a response. He gives me the specs on Ron's first wand, which was 12 inches, ash, with a unicorn hair core, and it was a hand-me-down, which I did remember that. I was pretty sure it was a hand-me-down and from Charlie, as it turns out. Let's see. Oh, well, one of the main thing that he asks that I wanted to respond to is, why doesn't Harry buy Ron like a new pet or a wand or a book? Because obviously Harry could afford to buy Ron anything. Ron's really touchy about that. Like he's frustrated that he's poor, but he also doesn't really want Harry's like sympathy. Like he's kind of like he's somewhat prideful about it. Like he just is frustrated by the fact that the family's poor, but he doesn't really want to take handouts, you know. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like if something like random happens where he thinks that he's just like at the Quidditch World Cup in the next book, like when the God damn it, what are they called? The Leprechaun Gold. like falls from the leprechauns into the stadium, and he gets some. He's happy to have something like that, like anybody, because it's just like a free for all. It's not like somebody being like, "Here, poor boy, have some money." So he's fine with something like that, and of course he finds out later that it doesn't last and it's not real. But that makes him sad and upset. But anyway, I think Harry would love to be able to buy him a new pet or any of those things, but like he knows that Ron won't be down with that shit. But he does still, and when he buys, and that's the thing, when he buys him, because Judy, right, replied about this, that Harry buys Ron and Hermione the omnioculars. In the next book, and Ron's like, no, don't bother, and Harry's like, mind you, you won't be getting anything for Christmas for the rest of your life, and he's like, okay, fine. So even then he resists at first, because he feels embarrassed, because they're expensive, and he's like, oh, I can afford that. And then Jorge asks, and looks like Fabian answered, but I'll get into it anyway for a second. So about the who goes into the forest thing. First of all, when Mr. Weasley's talking about Harry and Ron going into the forest, he's talking about them being alone and wandering off on their own, like exploring or doing shit. And at this point, the only time that they've been in the forest together at all, actually, was the previous year when they followed the spiders and ran into Aragog and got saved by the car. In their first year, it's Harry, Hermione, and Neville and Malfoy that all go in with Hagrid as part of their detention. Because Ron had gotten bit by Norbert, and now Norberta, and so he's not able to go. He wasn't able to help Harry and Hermione free Norbert. So therefore he also didn't get detention. So yeah, that's that. But And Sarah Mead asks, do all of the owls have the ability to deliver magical messages like Hedwig and Errol, or are there the equivalent of muggle and magical owls? Oh, now that's... I only saw part of that question earlier, so I was prepared to answer, and now I'm not. I expect that since the other creatures are magical in the story, that there probably are magical owls too. I don't know for sure if they're different breeds or what. Because I mean they are like named as like normal, like Snowy and Tawny and Barn, and they're all like typical breeds of owl. So maybe it's that they are regular, but via the interaction with wizards, they're like, maybe they get smarter. I don't really know. I'm gonna have to Pottermore this one and see. Well, you know what? I tell you what, we're gonna try. We're gonna just screw it. We're gonna try and see if we can find out right now. Are the owls in Harry Potter magic? That's pretty much what we want. Owls, Pottermore. There we go. Let's see. The old British superstition that it is unlucky to see owls flying by daylight is readily explained, for when wizards break cover to send messages by day, something dramatic must be afoot in the magical world. Let's see if we can figure out. Okay, so this is okay. So here we go. It says whether because that they possess an innate bent for magic, just as pigs are reputed to be innately non-magical, which is interesting, or because generations of their ancestors have been domesticated and trained by wizards, and they have inherited the traits that make this easy, owls learn very quickly, and seem to thrive on their task of tracing and tracking the witch or wizard for whom their letters are intended. The mystical association between the name and the name and the human who bears it has long been understood by witches and wizards of all cultures. While the process remains mysterious even to those who train up owlets to become wizarding pets or post owls, the birds appear to be able to make such a connection between the name and its possessor that enables them to trace the witch or wizard concerned wherever he or she may be. An owl does not need to know an address, although witches and wizards generally add the place to the envelope on the off chance that the owl is intercepted and the letter falls into other hands. Should a witch or wizard not wish to be sent letters or tracked in any other way, he or she may have to resort to repelling, disguising, or masking spells. I was actually just going to ask that, and then I saw that it was the next paragraph, of which there are a great range. It is possible to protect you, because I was wondering how Slughorn was able to disappear, and now I see that this is the answer. If a witch or wizard is determined to not be contactable by a persistent creditor or ex-boy or girlfriend, they might try a masking spell specific to that person, but this ploy is easily circumnavigated by asking someone else to send the owl. In general, it takes a strong protective magic and a willingness to forego a lot of birthday cards to avoid the attentions of owl posts. And it says that trained owls are expensive, and it is quite usual, for a wizarding family to share a single owl, or else only use postal owls. So it stands to reason that Errol is the only owl that the Weasleys have for a while until Percy gets Hermes when he becomes a prefect. Okay, well that's pretty cool. I think that covers the actual questions. Yeah, I think. Let me double check. Yeah, because we addressed all that stuff in the previous video. Okay, yeah, that's it. I'm sorry, I'm done. Okay, guys. Thank you as always for listening. I look forward to your new comments, and feel free to, share it with your friends and shit like that. I'm not, this is obviously a very much a non-profit agenda, but people are cool. Just for more insight, comments, and interaction. So, yeah. We will see you in the next one, hopefully very soon, and enjoy the rest of your day part, and